Hi everyone, welcome back to another one of those videos which will take you towards Grand Mastery. In this video, we will learn what to do when you have absolutely no clue about what you want to do. Many a times we get stuck in these situations when we cannot see a single good move that you can play. Now chess mentors and chess experts will always tell you that you need to always have a plan.
Do I really look like a guy with a plan?
That if you don't have a plan, then you cannot win a chess game. Or as the popular chess saying goes, that a bad plan is better than no plan at all. Now this is a chess match which, although being a bullet chess match, leads to many positions in which it could be pretty difficult to find out a plan. So what do we do in such a scenario when we don't have a plan? That's what this video is going to be all about. So let's begin with the opening phase of the game. The match starts with the move pawn to d5, knight to f6, bishop to f4. The London system is on. Black has a variety of ways to deal with the London system, so we can skip ahead a few more moves. We have these moves being played on the board, so let's pause in this position. So let's talk about planning and strategy for a few moments, right? One of the few things that becomes extremely clear from this position is that Black is about to fianchetto his bishop. So that is something White has to be prepared for. Now whenever any chess player plans to fianchetto his bishops, usually he would tend to control the long diagonals with his bishop, which are these diagonals in this case. Now in such a scenario, Black would not be too hasty to push pawns towards the center, because that would simply block off the fianchettoed bishop. That would just impede Black's own plan. So those are two things we understand about Black's plans and Black's motives. Now how should White approach this position to be able to counteract Black's plans? You have to be careful about your g2 square, about your b2 square, and you have to ensure that whenever you do move this knight from out of the position to any other square, that the bishop doesn't go and hit the rook. And we have a similar case for the other diagonal, which is this diagonal. Anytime the d pawn pushes forward to any other square, you have to be very careful about the b2 square and the a1 square, which currently has a rook standing there, which is a very valuable piece and you don't want to lose it. That should not be a part of any of your plans. Yes, in case the chess experts didn't tell you, losing a rook is bad. Let's continue with the match. White continues development. Black continues with the plan that we already knew Black was simply going to follow. White plays a move pawn to h3. Now why is such a move played, or why is such a move useful? It serves one of two purposes. The first is the knight can't jump into g4 anymore, which means f2 pawn won't come into any attack from the knight. And at the same time, this also gives White's bishop a square to tuck back into in case at any point of time in the future, the Black knight decides to jump into h5. Moves like pawn to h3 and pawn to h4 can be very valuable, and they have their own pros and cons, and you should always keep in mind that these moves can come in very handy, both in an attacking and a defensive sense, so always keep thinking of them. In fact, at the highest levels of chess, when no other options look very promising, they often simply tend to push moves like h4, h5 just to cause some problems to the opponent's position, because it's just one of those plans you go to when nothing else works. And sometimes it can be the main plan of an opening as well. So let's continue with the game. More developing moves take place, and White and Black, both of them castle. Then Black plays this move, pawn to d6. Let's talk about this position for a while. Whenever two pawns are standing in the center, right beside each other, like these two pawns for Black, which are the d and the e pawns, you have to keep one thing in mind at all times, that at any point, any one of these pawns can simply be pushed forward and the other pawn will continue to support that push. And this also works the other way around. If the d pawn is pushed forward with a move like this, then the e pawn will continue to support that push. So what you have to realize is this can lead to a lot of forks. So let's talk about a hypothetical situation. Let's say White just continues to develop without keeping this particular fact of the pawn push in mind. What can happen? Let's say White simply plays a move c4, a good move, taking more control towards the center. Black plays knight to d7, queen develops, rook develops, White takes more center, and suddenly you get hit with a move like pawn to e5. Now it looks harmless at this point, but this move is not really harmless. You can't simply get out of the way, because this pawn can be pushed further forward, and this would lead to a pretty disastrous fork, and White would have to give up one of those two pieces. And at the same time, if we go back a couple of moves, instead of going away with the bishop, trading the pawns doesn't help too much either, because the pawn would continue to attack the bishop, and no matter where you go, this pawn can still be pushed forward, forking the bishop and the knight. And if you think I've solved all my problems, now I'm safe because I'm gonna remove one of Black's defenders, and once Black takes back, then I'm free to take the pawn and I've won one of black's pieces. No, that's simply not gonna happen. Black is not even going to capture white's knight over here. Black is simply going to go and capture your rook, and you'll be down in exchange for the entire rest of the game. So always be aware of central pawns which are connected pawns, which was this particular position right here. When black pushed the move pawn to d6, when these pawns were created, they can be pushed anytime, be aware. White continues with the move, bishop goes back to h2, avoiding all such fork. Knight comes in, developmental moves take place, the center gets crowded with pawns and rooks and everything else, and whenever your opponent is pushing a pawn too further forward, it can sometimes be useful to stop the progress of that pawn, as white does in this case. You don't want to see a move like black's pawn to a4 over here. It just causes too much stress in the position and creates tensions that you don't want in your own side of the board. Those are tensions you want on your opponent's side of the board. So avoid such tensions. Black brings the rook into the game, lining it up with the white queen, as we can see. White does the same thing, lining up with the black queen. It might seem like that these files, the C and the D files over here, are very crowded, but honestly it does not take too much time for files like these to open up, and suddenly you might realize that you're on the wrong side of a tactical exchange. You don't want that. You want to get out of such positions where your queen is facing a rook. Whenever you're, or any such position where one of your major pieces is face to face with a minor piece of a lesser value, just get out of those positions. It's a good principle to follow until unless you've made some tactical calculations that make you winning. Black moves his bishop, white gets out of the way of the rook. Black just repeats moves, trying to get a winning position, where black is simply saying, you got nothing, white, you just gotta sit back and watch me dancing. But white is like, nah, we're gonna continue playing this match. So understand, at this point also, the white queen is in the direct line of the black dark square bishop. It's also not advisable to stay in a situation like this. Black repeats moves, white also repeats a couple of moves, and in this position something interesting happens, right? So the black f6 knight has taken a step backward. So what this does is it releases the dark square bishop on this diagonal, and now we have to start to be very careful about the center. Black is finally now going to unleash an attack on the center, and what can you do as white? You gotta make sure you don't lose any pawns because you didn't watch out for some tactics, right? At this point, the only thing keeping white d4 pawn alive is the knight on f. So keep those things in mind as you play. You can simply push a pawn like that forward. Now you no longer have to worry about such a pawn being hanging somewhere in the future when your knight moves away. Black chooses to close the position, and this is not necessarily a good move because this totally takes away any prospect that this light square bishop had or may have had in the future. Now the only way black could possibly remaneuver this bishop is by moving all of these pieces out of the way somehow and then getting the bishop to this diagonal and bringing it back into the game. So don't close your positions when you have a bishop trapped in there behind your pawns. Now here is where we have to discuss that what do you do when it looks like apparently you have no plan. Now if you are one of those people who can't think of a plan in this position, this is how you go about playing this position. You look at your pieces and you compare them to your opponent's pieces, and whichever of your pieces is more powerful or it's a better piece, you keep them that way, and whichever one of your pieces are not actively participating in the game or contributing much towards the game, you want to put them to a better place or a better square. By that, what do I mean? Let's go piece by piece. Is the queen very useful at this point? Maybe not, but it's on a long diagonal and it can become useful in the future. What about these knights and these rooks? The rooks may be able to get into the game in the future if any one of the files opens up, but since none of the files are open right now, you can let the rooks be where they are. Or if you want to move the rooks to some other position, you need to yourself open up any one of the lines, such as moving this knight out of the position and then somehow pushing pawn to f4 and then opening up lines. You can then put the rook behind the open line because rooks are most powerful in open lines, as the experts tell you. Now the pieces of white which are most limited in this position is this piece, which is the knight on d2. Now we gotta get it to a better square. So where can we put it where it can have more influence in the match than it currently has? One such square that you can see at this moment is the square g3. So how do we go there? The journey is simple. You simply come back to f1 and from f1 you get there. So we can make that journey. Now in this position, you need to notice something else that is very interesting and is going on all through the match. It is how many defenders this pawn, which is the pawn on e4, has. At this point, it has 4 different defenders, which is these, this, and this. The queen, knight, bishop, and rook, they all defend this pawn. But let's go move by move and see how many defenders this pawn continues to have, because that's very interesting and that's how you can plan your matches as well. So let's keep going. Bishop goes back. Currently the e pawn has only 2 defenders, which are these 2 pieces. Black comes comes and attacks this pawn. And in the next move, white moves out of the way with one more of the defenders, knight to f1. As was planned, the knight is going to g3. Now black forgets that this pawn still continues to have one more defender, which is the queen, and black simply blunders in time pressure and also not noticing the last defender that is still left in the position. So we can capture the blundered piece. Black comes back with an attack on the queen and also on the pawn, so you have to defend both the pawn and the queen, and this move serves just that purpose. Black plays a few more moves that are not essentially doing much, and as white, since you are winning, you have the luxury of playing a few more moves as well, which may not necessarily be winning. So a move like knight to e4, what it does is that it blockades the black's e pawn, and it also is about to force an exchange on the c5 square, and when you're winning, any exchanges are good for you. But the position is still quite tied up and you need to unwind the position bit by bit. Knight takes, bishop takes, all exchanges are good for white. Pawn to f5. Now that's an interesting move. In this position, white's bishop is attacked, so you gotta get out of the way. White gets out of the way. Black prepares to push some pawns. The rook doubles up. This file is now called a semi-open file. What is a closed file? A closed file is one where both of black's and white's pawns are present. A semi-open file is one such file where only there's one pawn of one of the two people playing is present. And a complete open file is where there are no pawns present whatsoever. We don't have a complete file in this match, but we do have a semi-open file, and the more open a file is, the more prospect your rook has down that file. So pile up on that file. Since you don't have a clear attacking winning plan, this is how you plan about a match. Put your pieces where they should be and just keep doing that till your position becomes overwhelming. Black continues piling up as well. White improves the position. The queen and rooks dance around. The bishop makes all the way up to the square g5. Now we see that the bishop's position has been significantly improved. The bishop was on the h2 file, and here it was trapped all along. It had very little scope on this diagonal because there are 3 pawns of black which are opposing the white's dark square bishop, but now here on g5 the bishop has a lot of scope. Black is losing, black doesn't want to trade, black goes back, the queen comes forward, the queen and bishop are now connected, and in this position black runs out of time. So let's talk about this position for a while, right? So this is what we achieved by putting our pieces on optimal square. Black's bishop have no scope, being blocked in or caged in by his own pawns, while white's bishops are free to attack on the black position. The knight is on a very dominant square, and from here it has control over a multiple number of squares in the center and also in the defense. White's rooks control the semi-open file, while black rooks are scattered in 2 different files where they don't control much of anything. White's position is also incredibly safe, where the closest any black piece is from the white king is at least 6 squares away, while that of the black king on the other hand has a white piece lurking around just 3 squares away. And this is also a very good measure of understanding whether your position is dangerous or not. Yeah, not all pieces need to be very close to you to pose a threat, but the more of your opponent's pieces you have near your king, the more danger you are in. So these were some of the tips and tricks that I wanted to give you guys to understand how to plan when a plan is not incredibly clear, or when you cannot go into an ultra attacking scenario simply because the position is too tied up. Now I hope many of you enjoyed this video and you got many ideas that you can use in your own games if you ever feel like you can't come up with a plan. Now I've noticed that many of you guys are watching my videos, but you're not liking or subscribing. Now come on guys, if you're watching it, hit the like and subscribe button. I'm sure you won't be disappointed with the upcoming content. I look forward to seeing you in my upcoming videos, and thank you for watching. So don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. See you.